Hello.
Oh, there you go. Oh my God, something was wrong with my headphones.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's good. That's good. I didn't need anything else to go wrong today.
Oh no, what's happening?
We're not muted. That's far for starters. And only the people that got here early get the treat of hearing me bitch at poor Lauren.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such idiots in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights.
Now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Alright, why did it go black? Of course we're going to have Z technical difficulties. What the fuck? Let's try that again. There we go. Hello, and welcome to Z technical difficulties. Now this is HBR Talk 258. One thing nearly half of people are starting to understand. And obviously there's going to be more to the article than that. Which you can see in the background that this article is a little bit complicated in terms of the title, but before we get into that, why did my page just disappear? God damn it! Welcome to the technical difficulties with the Badgers. But yeah. Well, like anybody who was listening before the show got to hear, if anything else goes wrong today, that's enough things going wrong today. I have had technical difficulties all fucking day. But I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator, Lauren Brooks, and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. And tonight we're going to take a look at an article by Dr. John Barry for the Center for Male Psychology, in which he highlights some issues and an area of progress, and asks, as you can see in the title, a very important question. Q Brother Soulstar gave us $2 US and asked also a very important question. So did you guys hear about Carolyn Bryant? And yes, I did, about 20 minutes before I started the show. And maybe less than that. Almost changed the show topic, but I figured I'd hand it off to Brian and let him decide if he wants to make it a topic for the news show, because that's news.
Yeah.
So yeah, the accuser whose accusation led to Emmett Till's death at the hands of an angry mob, whose petty accusation, by the way, all she accused him of was a wolf whistle. It's just that racism played a part and misandry played a part. And that she passed away from cancer, if I understand right. But that incident, if you haven't learned about that bit of history, that bit of American history, look up Emmett Till and read about it. But fair warning, that for anybody who's never heard that history before, it is heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, and enraging.
Yeah.
He was beaten to death. He was tortured to death, essentially, and his body was unrecognizable when it was over. It's just there's no two ways about it. This was an absolute atrocity over being accused of wolf whistling. So there's your history. That was I'm not gonna make the show about that topic, but yeah, it's, I think, Rest in Hell trended on Twitter. Yeah, and
Incidentally, his body was recognizable depending on how advanced your understanding is of
recognizable.
Skeletal remains.
Yeah.
You could, if you have a rudimentary understanding of skeletal remains, you could identify his remains as I won't say African American, but African. But if you have even a basic understanding of skeletal remains, you could recognize that he was male, which would demonstrate that Emmett Till was lynched partially because he was black, but principally because he was male. And this is what's so difficult to get across to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As-
I mean,
as-
it's
nobody gets criticized for wolf whistling if they're female.
right. And for what they did to him, it's not even like it was a rape accusation. It was, hey, lady, you look nice today, or whatever the hell it was. You know, it's the equivalent of that, whatever that was. It's just infuriating. But again, like you said, we'll leave that
Yeah.
where that is, because this story is just it's.
There's so much. We probably ought to discuss the phenomenon in conjunction with the modern discussion on quote unquote street harassment.
Yeah.
Which I object to the idea of street harassment, because pretty much every woman who makes that allegation is her, Carolyn.
It would be very informative to discover the last time a woman was lynched in any given country as a result of her seducing a male victim.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever happened.
I don't think it's ever happened, has it?
I really don't. We don't even always get recognition from society that the victim is a victim when a woman genuinely victimizes someone, like when he's underage, or when she uses a drug, or when she doesn't get what she wants and she leverages a false allegation to punish him for refusing her, which all of those things are abuse, but not all of those get recognized as abuse. He's child support if he's underage.
Not even in the event of a lower class or working class woman seducing an upper class man into the things to which Emmett Till was accused of seducing an upper class woman. I mean, we've been trying to get this thing across for a long time.
Yeah.
Like it's for everything you can say about this being racially skewed. Like, imagine if you could put that across in the same way as being racially skewed, even all the way going back to the time before the United States of America even existed. Like, it's always been a thing for men of any class to be accused of quote unquote seducing a woman of any class. Yeah, and I say seducing, but it becomes rape when a man does it to a woman, and it's just called seducing when a woman does it to a man. Like
Well, and seduction used to be actually a kind of a crime when men did it to women, but not when women did it to men, in and of itself.
it's still called seducing to this day when a woman does it to a man. When a woman of 30 does it to a man of 14, or whatever you can call it, a man, that's partially the problem.
Yeah.
Like a man of any age is called whatever it needs to be called to make it so that the woman who raped him can be called. It can just be called a woman having a sexual relationship. She merely seduced him.
Yeah.
Yep.
In the same way that if the genders were reversed, it would be called rape.
So what I will point out is that this actually kind of is touched on in the article that I picked out for us to look at today, and we probably should get into that because it's something that there's positivity and negativity in it. The topic we've been talking about, like, again, I want to leave room for that to be a news topic because I think Brian's going to want to talk about it. But this article is great. This was written by Dr. John Barry. I think anybody that's been at ICMI has probably met him. But in any case, I will get into the article just because, this, like I said, this is kind of part of it, even though it doesn't necessarily mention this specific subtopic, the incident of Emmett Till's murder and the death of his accuser. And honestly, I think it probably could have, but it wouldn't really need to. So he writes, in a paper published a few days ago, it was found that people, especially women, are more willing to accept men being harmed than women being harmed. Many people won't be surprised by this. They might even find it obvious. And lots of people will think there's nothing wrong with it. After all, men are traditionally the protectors of others, even said to be more disposable than women and children. And although these are painful ideas for some people, a long history of nature and nurture seems to underline this point. Even today, we see that even though men make up at least a third of victims of domestic violence, and that's at least because we don't really know, if like that, just a side to the article, it's harder for men to report, and it's harder for men to be taken seriously when they report. So we don't know how many men aren't being counted, as opposed to, like, women. We know that women have all kinds of organizations to help them, and we don't know how many false accusers are being counted among women. So the minimum men make up is a third. Men are probably, in my opinion, just from reading the statistics on self-reported behavior and on reported behavior, reported experiences, and also the social tolerance for female perpetrated abuse, I would suspect that men are more like 70% of domestic violence victims. It's just that there are things that men don't complain about that women complain about, and then there are complaints that men could make that don't get taken seriously unless the complaint is coming from a woman and is about the behavior of a man. Just a caveat there. But and he said male victims often go unrecognized and unsupported, as demonstrated by the UK government, which categorizes violence against women and girls as a national threat, but struggles to even compile the most basic statistics on male victims.
A national threat.
A national threat. So
imagine that. Half of the country is under attack, everybody. It's a national threat. Like, this is not even close to reality. This is gaslighting on, like, of the highest order, you know, just to try to get people to support this stupid fucking measure.
And I want to point out, when we use the phrase domestic violence or partner violence, intimate partner violence in the United States, what is being talked about in terms of how the domestic violence victims advocacy industry treats it is anything from like the stereotypical beating on each other with fists, using weapons, threatening to kill, things like that, to controlling each other's finances, cheating, bad-mouthing each other. Domestic violence can be entirely verbal and still be considered domestic violence, intimate partner violence. And who's not muted that needs to be muted? Like, Chad's mentioning it.
Oh.
It might be. That's probably you, Lauren.
Is it me? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can see it in Discord. There we go. But yeah, when you look at this, like, we're not talking about just necessarily what you would consider violence. If you hear the word violence, you think of physical action against another person. A woman who doesn't have a job, chooses not to have a job, and then is told that she cannot spend more money on credit than the husband makes, can file a complaint that she's being abused by her husband. If a husband tells his wife that she's not pretty anymore, right, that can be considered abuse. And these are things, like, especially if he says it a lot, right? You used to be really hot, but now you're fat and ugly. Like, pretty much all of the verbal exchanges in the TV show Married with Children, for those in the United States, would constitute domestic violence under the way domestic violence is measured. But the organizations that do that would only consider Al Bundy's words to be domestic violence. They wouldn't treat everything that Peggy says that's just as mean, that's just as caustic and venomous toward her husband. You know, like,
I believe
that domestic violence.
I believe the active adjective is proxy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this is called proxy violence, and yet it never occurs to anyone that the idea of proxy should perhaps be reduced. Because what is this proxy exactly? The proxy is the government. If a woman wants to enact violence on a man, she does it through the proxy of the police, of the government. And none of the people who are calling for the defunding of the police will ever do it in light of the way that women enact violence on men via the proxy of the government.
And see, that's another thing. That's a domestic violence that women don't generally face. You don't see hordes of men accusing women of violence they didn't engage in, because why would they? Nobody's going to listen. And the motivation behind making a false allegation of domestic violence or sexual violence includes the expectation that one will be believed and the action will be taken on the basis of the allegation. Well, men don't have those two factors, right? They can't count on that. So accusing the woman of violence when she didn't engage in it would be more risk than anything for a guy. So it's almost it's fair to say that it's probably, if not a completely unique experience to men, it's at least incredibly rare that women are subjected to this by male partners. And especially in regard to community action, like involving police or organizations. So again, we're looking at a situation where even with all of those factors, we know from the incidents of domestic violence that these organizations cannot ignore when men experience it, and that police can't just dismiss, and the courts can't just dismiss. We know that they make up at least a third of victims. But statistically, in terms of perpetration, women initiate about 70% of the time when only one person is initiating violence. And we know that about 2/3 of violence, about 57%, is two-way. And it's unlikely that those women are dramatically different from other women. It's more likely that women are initiating in that instance at about 70% as well. And one of the other factors, like when we hear about the stereotypical domestic violence where the man injures the woman, that's usually a situation, the biggest predictor of that happening is actually the woman's perpetration, her initiating violence. And so, I mean, if you back somebody in a corner and you continue to engage in violence against that person until they have to try to escape you, or they snap and can no longer control their impulse to defend themselves, they're going to be a lot more violent than they would be in that moment, because they're going to be panicked, or they're going to be enraged, or they're going to snap. Like, they're going to be a lot more violent in that moment than they would be if they just got angry and initiated violence, or if that this was a more calm situation. And I don't think people understand, when we're talking about two-way domestic violence where the woman initiates violence, but then she's the one that gets injured. A lot of feminists will respond to discussion of that as if we're talking about it like it's fair. Well, it doesn't really matter whether it's fair or not. It's realistic. It's not fair that your whole house burns down because you didn't pay attention for a minute when you were frying something on the stove. I mean, your attention only lapsed for a minute. Like, it's not fair to lose your whole house because of that. But it's possible. And it's possible because a series of unfortunate events can happen. The fire can catch onto something like the curtains in the window. Or you may have grease in your grease trap that you didn't realize was thick and flammable. You may panic yourself and accidentally throw the pan, which happened one time when I was in the room. Thank goodness that I actually had the baking soda in my hand at the moment.
Oh, wow.
I had one friend who was very jumpy, and we were cooking, and she set the kitchen on fire. She just turned away for a minute, turned back, and there's the pan. And the only thing that stopped the fire was, like, I just, in without even thinking about it, just turned around and threw baking powder, or baking soda, sorry, not powder, that would be flammable, but baking soda all over the fire. Don't do that, by the way. Don't test that. It's not safe.
Yeah, no. Gin Bottle in the chat says, doctor or a heavy frying pan. And that's a very good point.
Yeah.
As I think I got across at some point in some other show, the great equalizer, when it comes to men and women in relationships, people like to say if God made man, Sam Colt made man equal because of the invention of the gun. But when it comes to the relationship between men and women, they were already equal long before the invention of Sam Colt's revolver. Because if you're sleeping next to someone, then you didn't even need the gun to be the great equalizer. Anything can be the great equalizer between two people who are sleeping next to each other, which has always been the case with men and women. A frying pan can indeed be the great equalizer. A large rock can be the great equalizer between two people who are sleeping with each other, which throws a big old wrench into this whole idea that men have always had the upper hand physically over women. No, they haven't, because men and women have always had this relationship where they are so intrinsically interlocked together in terms of relationships that they sleep next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
They necessarily sleep next to each other. And so neither of them has the upper hand over the other. Because if either of them feels like picking up a large rock and smashing it over the head of the other, then they have the upper hand. And so neither has the upper hand because they go together.
Yeah.
Intrinsically.
Right. In fact, you don't even have to have strength. Deborah Pawnee
Nope.
has actually got men's stories up on her YouTube channel. She did the most extensive research that's been done to date worldwide on men's experience of coercive control. And coercive control is often supported by violence or threats of violence. And like she had one respondent in her survey that explained to her that his wife had poured boiling water on him while he slept.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, we're talking anything that will do harm. Women use poison. Women have killed with rat poison. And you know, like, then you get caught with rat poison, thank God. But
Lorena Bobbitt cut off her husband's
Mhm.
Johnson while he was asleep. I mean, there's
Yeah,
no
it
telling what you
doesn't take
there's
much
no-
force to do that.
right. No, there's there's a number of things that you can do to someone when they are unconscious.
And it is really difficult to cut out a woman's vagina while she sleeps.
Yeah.
Really,
It's
I mean,
really difficult to do that at
remarkably
all.
difficult.
I mean, like, there's a lot of nerves down there. But and the thing is, it's not something you could do quickly either, right? This was something she was able to do quickly, and like that could have killed him. There's a lot of blood vessels there. That could have been deadly. He would have bled out. But there's a lot of different ways that women do harm that don't require them to be bigger, stronger, faster, even don't require them necessarily to be smarter than men, just meaner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so yeah, and a lot of things, like I've used this example now I think a million times, but if you take the gender out of it, you talk about two people in a public place, like at a bus stop, and one of them says something rude and disrespectful, maybe degrading, sexually explicit, whatever. One says something like that to the other one, and the other one hauls off. A says that, B hauls off and slaps A for the offense. Right? If they're both men, everybody recognizes that, well, A's an asshole, and B can't take getting ribbed, so he's violent. He has a hair trigger temper. Right? They both did something wrong. One was abusive. The other one escalated from verbal abuse to violence, and easy to recognize. Same thing with women. If one woman is shouting insults and another woman hauls off and hits her, people are like, well, you lost your composure, right? But as soon as they're opposite sex, if the person who says something degrading is male, that gets treated like it's bigger than the violence that the woman reacts with. Like, she can slap the shit out of him, and people are going to be making excuses. Well, look, listen to what he said. I would slap him too if I was her. Like, that's the way they respond. But turn it around the other way. What if the person who said something degrading and sexually explicit was the woman? And it could even be the same. Your genitals smell terrible. I can smell your genitals from here. You haven't taken a bath in months. What's wrong with you, right? Just something along those lines, right? It doesn't matter, male or female. You don't say that to a stranger. It's rude. But you don't necessarily slap someone for saying that. Like, they're not violent. They're not chasing you. You can walk away from that. You can say, God, that was rude. That's disgusting. Why would you say something like that to a stranger? But you don't have to react to that because it's just words. If a man reacts by slapping a woman for saying something like that, all hell breaks loose. The nearest other guys are going to beat the hell out of him for it because he hit a woman. Other women are going to treat her like a victim and support her because, a man hit her. Like, either way, a woman can get away with whatever she does on either side of that engagement. And no matter what part of it the man is involved in, his behavior is viewed as worse than hers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically why we are in this situation where we see more statistics on women and girls reporting domestic violence and fewer statistics on male victims. We don't even always recognize when a man has been abused. But he goes on. The new paper by Dr. Tanya Reynolds, University of New Mexico, and colleagues was based on a series of 3 experiments involving over 600 participants. The findings lend support to what we already know about the gender empathy gap, gamma bias, and the sex difference in in-group bias. So the empathy gap is basically in that scenario I explained before. People will recognize that the woman is insulted when the man says something rude. They'll recognize that it might hurt her feelings or embarrass her, and they'll treat that as something she shouldn't have to experience.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they won't necessarily, when a man is the one being insulted, they'll be like, aren't you man enough to take that? I mean, she just said something rude to you. Get over it and move on. In reverse, if she is hit, people will consider her pain and suffering and her fear. They'll consider it part of a collective experience among women. And if he's the one that gets hit, people will just say that he deserved it, right? They won't treat it as something, they won't consider his pain and suffering, or if they do, they'll tell him, if you don't want to experience that, don't be a rude asshole. Nobody will tell a woman that. That's the empathy gap, right? The gamma bias is the fact that people have that attitude toward women. They're going to care about her welfare. They're going to care about her experiences, and they're going to care about her as a member of a demographic, not just her personally, but they'll care about her vulnerability. And she'll be visible in terms of her vulnerability, her experiences, her reactions, her emotions, any injury she might suffer, and so on, because she's female. Men do not receive that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the gamma bias is, but I think you explained it beautifully.
Oh, thanks.
Now,
it's essentially it's gynocentrism.
mm-hmm.
And then the in-group bias, the sex difference and in-group bias. Women have in-group bias, men don't. That's the first thing. Not as a gender. Men will have in-group bias for their team against another team, but they don't make their gender their team.
Right.
Women do. So I guess that's the best way to describe the sex difference and in-group bias. If this female-favoring phenomenon is a hint that Mother Nature protects population growth by making the lives of men less valuable than women, then it's grim news for men and explains why people would care less about men. So I want to point something out in regard to that. We hear a lot in the men's rights movement about something called natural gynocentrism, and I have a theory about that. Like, everybody explains the idea of natural gynocentrism the same way, right? The explanation that for why gynocentrism is natural and inevitable is you have to protect the mothers of society's children, right? You have to make sure that women are able to continue to have babies and raise those babies. That makes women important, not because they're women, but because they have babies.
Right.
So I don't think that's gynocentrism. I think that's gene-centric. I think, in terms of, passing on your DNA. And I think it's child-centric because we do protect children. They are vulnerable. What we see in gynocentrism today, the idea of women deserving more compassion and more recognition of their experiences because they're female, just because they're female. Like, there's nothing in nature that makes that normal or necessary. And if you look at, like I can't think of the name of the movie. It has, I think, Pierce Brosnan as a scientist or something. It was a movie about a volcano that was erupting, and this family is trying to get away from the lava flow and the disaster, basically. And there's a grandmother with them. And it's been years since I've seen this, so I don't know. The movie might even have been called Volcano or Dante's Peak or something like that. But they get to this point where they have to cross a body of water to get away from it. And they get into a boat and they start across, and it turns out that this water's been subjected to one of the phenomena that happens with volcanoes. Okay, Night Motorcyclist says Volcano was Tommy Lee Jones, so I'm pretty sure. I think Dante's Peak is the one. Q Brother Soulstar confirms. But and they're trying to get away. Yes, Pierce Brosnan was in Dante's Peak. They're trying to get away. They get into this water in this boat. The water starts eating through the boat because substances leaking, sulfur, I think, leaking into the water from underground has made it acidic. And they're not going to make it across. And either they're going to sink and everybody in the boat is going to be severely injured and die, or somebody is going to have to get out and push. They can't propel themselves fast enough to get across, or they've lost their oar, something along those lines has happened. And the grandmother gets out and pushes. He doesn't, she does. And the reason that she makes this decision is because she's lived her life. She doesn't need to have babies anymore. She doesn't need to raise babies anymore. She became more disposable than the young man because he is needed. The family depends on him. So, natural gynocentrism is kind of bullshit. Like, that makes sense in that movie, and it fits in that movie because gynocentrism historically has been based on women's utilitarian service to children, not women just being special because female, right? So, in terms of this, if the female-favoring phenomenon is a hint that Mother Nature protects population growth by making the lives of men less valuable than women, then it's grim news for men and explains why people would care less about men. That kind of, I would say, we do have a belief in terms of that. We do have a belief that this is the case, and I think we have a society-wide belief right now that this is the case, but I don't think it's natural. I don't think it's inevitable, and I think we can recover from that. We can get our society, if we use logic and reason, we can get our society back to a point where we recognize that human life is valuable regardless of the sex of the human life, and that we should not take away people's rights because somebody else is considered more human on the basis of their sex. That's my take on it, and it's something that I recently began talking about with Peter Wright, and we're sort of expanding on it in a couple of locations. One is the Wikipedia for Men. I can't remember what it's called, Wikimania, and the other one's on his blog. So, but this article goes on and makes a similar point. Let's not get too gloomy, and this is the part that I really am excited about. A survey of 22,208 adults in 32 countries. So this is a big, wide survey. Lots of people, lots of countries. Very big sample. Not something that should be easily dismissed. Suggests that a large number of people do care about men's well-being after all. The survey, published by the Global Institute for Women's Leadership on March 8th, International Women's Day, found that on average across all countries and age groups, 48% of participants agreed somewhat or strongly that we have gone so far in promoting women's equality that we are discriminating against men.
Wow.
48% of people in a 5 digits large sample size, that is a worldwide sample size, recognized that we have gone so far in promoting women's equality that we are discriminating against men.
Can we even call it women's equality at this point? At what point can that majority of people come to acknowledge that what we are talking about is not women's equality?
That's going to be a tougher one.
It's something else. I wonder if anyone can perhaps describe it for me.
Yeah, when you have all of the privileges that go along with your civil rights being respected, but none of the responsibilities that go along with it, I would say that's considered supremacy. It makes you an aristocracy, right? But
it's not even women's supremacy. It's men's inferiority.
Yeah.
I mean, you might say that necessarily denotes women's supremacy, but it's not even that. It's men's inferiority. They're not even prepared to confirm that means women are superior. They're far more interested in confirming that men are inferior.
I think with supremacy, though, I don't think that they're necessarily interchangeable, supremacy and superiority. Because when you look at supremacy movements, it's usually people demanding privilege without accountability or demanding special treatment that isn't offered to everybody else. But
yeah, that's what I mean. It's not even a female supremacy movement. It's a movement that means men need to do everything women tell them to do. So it's not even supremacy versus inferiority. There aren't even words that can express what this is about. It's that men need to do everything that women tell them, which isn't supremacy and inferiority. It's, I mean, the closest analogy.
Go with aristocracy.
It's something to do with aristocracy. It's like this. It's like the slave trade. I mean, can I say that? Can I even say that?
Well, you wouldn't be alone. A lot of us have made the comparison, and especially in terms of the male provider role and how that is enforced in, say, custody and child support laws and alimony laws. What else would you call having a court order somebody to labor in exchange for resources that are going to be provided to somebody else and not theirs to spend. That's slavery. That's what slavery is. Where a person is forced, because when the court orders something like that, the punishment if you fail to abide by the ruling and do what the court ordered you to do is jail. And jail is men and women coming to force you into the back of a car. You go to a hearing, and then men and women force you into a cell, a cage. Right? So that's force. That's violence. Putting someone in jail is violence. So under threat of violence, men are ordered to labor for the financial benefit of someone other than themselves. That's slavery. What else would you call it? There is no other name for that.
But we can't call it slavery because it's so normal.
Well, we outlawed it, so of course we can't call it
Yeah.
slavery, silly.
I was going to say, slavery used to be pretty normal. It's just,
Yeah.
instead of, it used to involve some sort of conquering. Women don't even have to conquer men for that. All they have to do is get other people to do it. And
Yeah.
for the longest time, there were not female police officers. There were just male police officers. But I mean, now, you can get thrown in jail by an egalitarian police force that might all be fucking each other when the department is closed for the night. Like we don't know. There's been some news stories that came out recently about that. But yeah, like that's slavery. There's no better way to describe that. Women are entitled to male labor. Man put it very, very simply there. Under the law, if she has your baby, or if you've been married for 10 years, she's entitled to your labor.
Yep.
And
For
now,
some reason.
I would consider men who are subject to child support orders to be oppressed. That's oppression. Slavery is oppression, right? Men who are falsely accused and go through false allegation ordeals, those men are oppressed. They're suffering systemic violence, and all that it takes to create that violence, to cause that violence, is for a woman to say a few words. And they have to defend peacefully while at a disadvantage against that violence. But I would say just the average guy walking down the street, I won't turn into a feminist. Feminists will say I'm oppressed because I'm female. I'm clearly not. Like, I'm doing something because I want to do it. I'm doing the job I want to do. And there isn't anybody doing anything like that to me. Right? Nobody's forcing me to do anything. I could switch what I'm doing right now. I could turn on the movement, and I would find a place in another movement. Nobody would, obviously people within the movement would recognize that was a betrayal and it would be horrible, an awful thing for me to do. But I would immediately get support from feminists. And feminist media would immediately start using my story against the movement. Like that kind of thing. You can't consider someone oppressed who has that kind of power. Right? That's bullshit.
Needless to say, I will try to say this without slurring. Needless to say, I could opt out of this whole system. I could call myself an MRA or a MGTOW. Either way, I don't see how any of this helps me. It doesn't matter what I call myself, but I suppose if I opt out of all of this, I could call myself a MGTOW. And it's only a matter of time before the government under which I live that's grammatically correct, under which I live, it's not going to help me. Because sooner or later, the government under which I live is going to tell me that being a MGTOW is some kind of hate group, or being an MRA is some kind of hate group. So it doesn't matter what I call myself. If I don't go along with, just go ahead and marry a woman. And if you're not able to marry a woman, or if you don't want to marry a woman, then the government under which you live is sooner or later going to figure out that you're some kind of terrorist.
Well, they'll figure out a way to tax you even more
Yeah.
than they already do.
See, that's
So-
the thing. If you don't get married and you're not supporting an individual woman and children financially, you pay more taxes.
Mhm.
And you pay for the welfare that is received by women who have babies with men who aren't going to support them.
Yep.
And that's
So-
that's the bottom line. The government will figure out a way to make you pay, and then on top of that, on top of finding a way to make you pay, then they also demonize you as a terrorist.
Yeah.
One way or another, you could try to get off the grid.
Right. Oh my god. Did you
But
know
you will not be able to get off the grid.
about
Ever.
10 years ago, I was in an argument. I swear it was on Facebook, about this with some friends, like more local than not necessarily MRAs, about the level of freedom that we have in the United States. And no, it was on gather.com. And it was more than 10 years. But basically, like there's a whole movement for off-grid living here of especially if you go out west. There's a whole movement of people living without grid water and without grid electricity, without grid gas. They have passive heat, they have solar power, they have wind power, some of them have geothermal heat, some of them have water power. And they're more minimalist. A lot of them are homesteaders. They don't necessarily get most of their food from the grocery store. A lot of them are hunters. And in an area that's more sparsely populated, they've been able to do that for years. But a lady tried to do the same thing in Florida, where she was going to go off grid in terms of water, and she created her own water treatment system. And she had clean water. She was capable of creating clean water. And they went after her, condemned her property, because she didn't have a way to receive city water, and basically evicted her, made her homeless, and if I remember right, prosecuted her for stealing rainwater.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I don't understand that. There's states that you cannot collect rainwater, like California, who
Mm-hmm.
they seem to perennially be going through these droughts, right? But yet and still, when they have like massive downpours like they just had, they're not allowed to collect the rainwater. I don't, and I understand what it is. It's big corporations, specifically Nestle, that owns I forget what water source it is. It's like right there. They won't let California use the water. Instead, Nestle owns the water source.
Yeah.
They bottle it and sell it. Instead, it's oh my god, the motivations behind so many laws are just completely fucking backwards, and only really exists to benefit like big corporations like Nestle.
For the government.
Or the government.
Like when your water rights are controlled by the government, you pretty much are screwed. You
Yeah.
can't live without water.
Yeah.
You know, and
And
that's an issue, right?
isn't that on the list of like basic human rights? Like, isn't that something that I don't know? I'd have to read the UN's charter, or what they're about, what they stand for. But I'm pretty sure when there's no water in Africa, or there's like there's a shortage of clean water, the UN sure as shit steps in to try to solve that problem, right? But we're not allowed to collect the thing that falls from the sky.
Right.
Oh my god, it just drives me mad. It drives me insane.
Right, and that's pretty much government in a nutshell.
Yeah.
You know, this nobody produces this. It is part of the environment. It falls from the sky and lands on your property, but it belongs to us.
Right.
You can't touch it, right? Even if their reservoirs are full, even if they can't do anything with it, doesn't matter. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Now, granted, there are places where you should not catch water in a rain barrel and just leave it, because you will get mosquitoes, and mosquitoes carry West Nile, and West Nile can be deadly.
Right.
But that's a whole different story. That's not why you're being limited. They don't accuse you of stealing something to prevent that. You get told this is a bad idea, and there are things you can do. You can treat your water to prevent mosquitoes from hatching in it. So there's all that. But yeah, in terms of recognition here, that we've gone so far in promoting women's interests, which is what really has happened. Granted, the survey came from a women's group, so they're not going to say that. But we've gone so far in promoting women's interests as defined by feminism that we are discriminating against men. And enough people recognize that now that I would say, in instances where that discrimination is obvious, and the damage that it does to society, and not just the individual man that it's happening to, is obvious, we may be able to see more public support for initiatives to change, right? For instance, if there's recognition, widespread recognition, that fathers are being discriminated against, and there is widespread recognition that not only does this harm the father who faces that discrimination, in that it takes away a relationship that is a focus of his life purpose, and may lead to suicide, but also that it's damaging to the child who loses that relationship with father, that mentorship, and that love and care and dedication and provision and protection, that will result in more widespread support for protection of paternal custody, and so more widespread support for 50-50 shared parenting. And people, I've been in conversations with people where, I've talked about fathers' rights, and one of the first things they say back to me when I explain what fathers' rights positions are is that, feminists want women to have full custody. Feminists are fighting to exclude fathers from children's lives, but still collect money from the father. All fathers' rights activists, men's rights activists, are looking for is 50-50 shared custody, and to have child support be fair. Like, most men's rights activists aren't even trying to eliminate child support. I think it should be eliminated. I don't think it's necessarily beneficial to the child, but most people aren't trying to make the government stop forcing men to pay child support. Most people aren't in the movement aren't trying to have those laws repealed. They're looking for reform that would reduce the amount to a reasonable level so that the father's not made homeless, and that would hold the woman accountable, the mother accountable, for how she spends it, so that she's not getting the child support and then going out and buying frivolous things and then coming back and saying she's not getting enough because she can't afford things for the child.
Yeah, there's plenty of other things that need to be corrected or
Hmm.
repealed and amended. I mean, just the idea that if you're late or behind on your payments, then you could lose your driver's license and therefore your ability to even earn an income.
Yeah, that never
I,
made
I mean,
sense to me. To punish
right?
you
And
for failing to pay your child support on time, we're gonna make it harder for you to pay it at all.
right, just
Brilliant.
so pants on head backwards. Like I just don't get it. And it only makes sense because it comes from the government, right? But they will never give up the power that they have, especially because, as we all know, they get kickback for it.
Hmm.
Every child that goes into the system, the state government of that state, they get money for every child that gets put into that system. They will not let that revenue go.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just
not.
it's
Yeah, we have to break down the system quite a bit in order to fix this problem.
yeah,
That's evident. That's a big issue. But and yeah, there's Title 4D.
that's
Is
it.
yeah,
Title 40.
it's the uh, it's part of the Contract for America. So this was a Republican gig. This was a right wing thing, I think. Um, but they basically incentivized collection of child support by the states by reimbursing the state for every dollar spent in the course of collecting child support. Now, Republicans in Ohio knew this was coming. They knew Bush was going to get elected. They knew the Congress was going to be mostly Republican. They knew the contract from America that Newt Gingrich was talking about at that time was going to be put into place. And in preparation for all of that, the state of Ohio mandated that men who pay child support have to pay through the state. They can't just pay directly to the mother. You can't write her a check and put child support in the memo and it counts. You have to pay through the child support enforcement agency through wage garnishment. And by doing that, they made all child support payments eligible for federal reimbursement. So if you live in a state that has a low divorce rate and you're having the shit taxed out of you because you maybe are not married, you don't support a family, and so you don't get the child tax credit, you make more than a poverty wage, you're paying the state of Ohio to pretend that they have to collect child support from every non-custodial father in the state, or they won't pay it. It's not really necessary, but you're still paying for that.
Yeah.
Through the federal government. Just so you know. We have a couple of super chats. Iron Maiden gave us $5 and then $2 with a typo correction, so I'm just going to combine this into one. So he gave us $7 USD. Said, "Can you sue Nestle if their water falls on your property?" Which sorry, I love that. Can you sue Nestle if their water falls on your property, or if the hail, because hail is made of water, damages your car? That's great. And if you have a leaky roof and it rains and it's Nestle's water and your house is damaged, your water landed on my roof. Stop that
God.
from happening.
Could you imagine?
You think that's your roof?
Yeah.
You think that's air that you're breathing?
It belongs to the bank, by the way. Your roof belongs to the bank, just so you know. Oh, and the county or the state where you're paying your property taxes.
Yeah.
But so the state you live in should sue Nestle, and the bank should sue Nestle for damaging their property that you live on, that you paid for.
And so the meme, I guess it's not really a meme because this is kind of what they want. You will own nothing and be happy. Well, we're like almost halfway there
Yeah.
because you really don't own anything.
You get taxed on everything.
Yes.
Y'all understand why I'm an ANCAP now?
Yeah.
You remember that
Yes.
scene in the movie Popeye with Robin Williams with a tax collector that's running around taxing the shit out of everything, and at one point he charges thumbtacks?
No.
Like, that's not an exaggeration. That's what life is really like.
Yeah.
It's just not funny in reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, not funny, haha. It's more funny like how George Thorogood means it when he says, "Now you funny too" in the song "One Bourbon, One Scotch, and One Beer." But yeah.
Perhaps we could try Ron Paul's idea. I mean, I know Ron Paul's fucking practically dead at this point, but maybe, given how often Ron Paul has been proved right, maybe we could elect some kind of candidate somewhere in the world along the lines of what Ron Paul was talking about. Like, maybe we could, like, fuck the Democrat Party, fuck the Republican Party. Maybe we could just not do all. Maybe we could actually defund all of these unelected bureaucracies
Yeah.
that are making everyone's lives worse. Maybe can we not even? Is there anyone we can elect who can do that for us?
No.
I guess not.
No, they're all on the take, man.
Well,
They're all
the,
they're all in the uniparty.
If we did, the federal government's immune system, controlled by the bureaucratic mind virus, right? The woke mind virus is an outreach of the bureaucratic mind virus. Would just react to it like an immune system does. The person would be under attack constantly. They would have a full tenure in office of getting accused of one thing after another. There would be legal action taken against them over and over again. There would be action taken to try to remove them from office. The entire news media, the whole establishment news media would demonize them and simultaneously ridicule them. Oh wait, we had that. We had a candidate that just went through that.
Yeah.
We had a politician in office that really wasn't a politician until he ran for president that just went through that. But he wasn't even going to break down the whole government. He was just going to hold the Justice Department accountable and make some reforms in the Education Department and the Tax Department. They were still going to be there. Imagine if somebody like me wanted to be president. Well, what's your platform? Well, I'm running on a platform of getting rid of most of the federal government. Like, all these departments that create policy that gets treated as law without ever being voted on by anybody that you voted for or against, they're gone. Like, we don't need a federal Department of Education. We don't need an Internal Revenue Service. We really don't need any of that. We don't need a federal environmental agency. All that. Like, if I ran for president, they would kill me.
Oh my God, so many people would be out of jobs. Oh.
I wouldn't win. I'm serious. If I announced and I ran on the platform that I would run on,
let's just
they
say
would kill
that you
me.
would. Let's imagine a world in which you would.
Imagine a world in which I won.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I think I would like that place a whole lot better.
We don't even
Hello, Britbong here. Y'all enacted a fucking civil war over not buying tea. By all means, don't buy tea. I don't even like tea. Fucking enact another civil war over not buying the fucking Federal Reserve or whatever it is.
Not buying bureaucracy?
Whatever it is. Like, Yeah, I can't. I can't even say what it is. But
You
given
you bloody bastard!
you bloody fucking man short bloody.
Safety nets.
Given how much tea you threw into the fucking Boston Harbor, throw all of the I can't think of an analogy as to what kind of chemicals you're going to throw into the Boston Harbor.
There's probably enough chemicals in there now, and to be honest. But no,
Yeah.
what we're paying for, and when we pay for the government that we have now in the United States, is the illusion of safety, which is what most safety nets really are, right? The illusion of safety. That is that is pretty much it. So we would have to throw our illusion of safety in Boston Harbor, which would probably end up killing all the fish. So, but Q Brother Soulstar gave us $2 USD and wants to know, would they kill you if your VP was Andrew Tate? Is he from the United States? I don't know if he could actually run if he's not.
No, he's British.
He wouldn't be eligible.
He's affecting an American accent.
Like I haven't listened to him talk enough to be. Well, I don't know. There's like 5,000 American accents. Like there are parts of America where if you cross town, the accent changes.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like that in other countries too. It's just America's very large. So yeah. But yeah, I just. No, I can't go into politics because, like I said, they would kill me. I would not survive. I would not survive like the first month of campaigning after I came out with a platform of actually completely dismantling whole departments of the federal government.
Yeah.
Like when people ask me, why haven't you run for office? It's because I don't want to die.
Well, I mean, see, if you get elected, then you have Secret Service for life.
Yeah, that's true.
But then you have to get elected, and I don't know. Otherwise, you're just seen as the guy that lost to whatever bigger loser there is. But no, the idea.
I don't know how many people would be comfortable with what I would be proposing anyway. I think a lot of people would not go for that idea yet.
Yeah, no, and the idea of Andrew Tate being VP is, I think, probably more unpopular than Kanye actually becoming the president.
Yeah, I honestly, like, I will support the man's right to free speech, to have the ideas that he has. They're his ideas. It's his brain. He's allowed to put whatever ideas in there he wants.
Yeah.
That's his right to maintain his freedom in that case. Not obviously if he's actually broken laws in a country where he's less likely to get due process, then that was pretty fucking stupid. But I mean, that's a different story. In terms of he can be. I've even said you have the right to be a misogynist. It's a shocking thing to say in some countries because they've just tried to make misogyny illegal. I think that failed, thank goodness. But they just tried to make misogyny illegal. You have the right to be a misogynist. Will I necessarily agree with you? Maybe not 100%. But you still have that right. And I would defend that right regardless.
Mm-hmm.
You have that right. You have the right to your own thoughts. You have the right to your own opinions. You even have the right to express them.
Yep.
That's a natural right.
Over the course of the last couple of years, some people have talked about maybe Tucker Carlson could be a nominee for the president. And until very recently, I've been like, no. Because he's associated with the fucking mainstream media. But at this point, I'm like, okay, things have changed.
Yeah, although there are things I like about Tucker Carlson, but he is an authoritarian conservative. Like, he says he used to be libertarian and he grew out of it. That bothers me.
Yeah.
And
while he was under the thumb of Fox News, I didn't trust him at all. But like I say, things have changed.
We have
And,
to listen
this-
to what he says about drugs, because
Well,
I don't think he's saying what he's told to say there. I think that's his real opinions.
Yeah, and then also there was an interview that I heard him do, and he was saying how, in his personal life he's not really a political person. And I'm like, what? That doesn't really kind of hold water. How do you have this intensely political job? I mean, of course it's adjacent to politics. You're a newscaster, right? A broadcaster, whatever, but how do you not have an opinion one way or the other? And I'm not saying that that's what he was saying about himself, that he doesn't
Yeah.
have an opinion one way or the other, but he was really trying to say how this is not really a big part of his life. And when we got home, we don't talk about politics. And that's probably true, because I think he has something like 5 or 6 kids.
My husband and I don't talk politics all that much.
Yeah.
I don't really talk politics a lot with my daughters either. My son, I do.
I never
but-
talk politics with my family. One
well-
doesn't tend to talk politics with one's family because one's family tends to be,
different.
One's family, even if you're in the small square in which all of us are, one's family tends to be normies, and one's family tends to get all their information from the television, and they're of the opinion that you have to get your information from the television because what's the alternative? The internet. And you can't trust anything you get from the internet.
Right.
See, that's one of the things that has benefited me. I was not raised by normies. I was raised by nerds. But and
So was I. But the
Yeah.
nerds I was raised by, to this day, get all their information from the internet.
no,
And
my family.
And that's why my whole family is gonna die from the fucking coup shots. Anyway.
My parents, when I was growing up, how little kids always ask questions. Like that was not an opportunity to answer kids' questions when I was a kid, and it wasn't a moment where they're like, "You're asking too many questions. Shut up." No, it was, let's find out. And then the next step was to start looking at different sources of information, or if the question was something of what would happen if we do this, and there was a way to do that safely, that's what we did. And that's the way my family was. My parents were teachers. They weren't teachers like you have today. They were teachers. They were educators, which means they assisted children in educating themselves and provided children with mentoring in how to better access the tools they needed to educate themselves and how to make use of those tools. That's not what teachers today do. They spoon feed you things they want you to believe. But yeah, and in regard to Tucker Carlson, I fully believe that they don't talk politics at his house. I'll bet his wife doesn't even watch him on TV.
Yeah.
Right. She's probably pretty busy if they have a lot of kids. But and he seems to be more of an outdoorsman, where he likes to go be, on Walden Pond or something. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that spends a lot of time just immersed in this stuff. He does his research on the things he's going to talk about. But because of that, he's going to filter everything through his ideology, and that's why his take on drugs is so bad. You can't cure drug use by outlawing it, because many people they don't believe necessarily that it's dangerous or damaging, or there's a valid reason for outlawing it. And there's a lot of people, especially in the United States, that if you outlaw something and they don't consider there to be a valid reason for it to be outlawed, they're going to do everything they can to get around your laws.
Exactly. Outlawing it only makes it more dangerous and more expensive for
Right.
people to get.
I mean, you see
You know.
that, you saw that with prohibition, you see that with gun laws, you see that with
Mhm.
piracy, any kind of
Mhm.
blue laws, basically.
Yeah.
Prostitution, right? It's pointless to outlaw that stuff. And it if you really wanted, for instance, to make the next generation not use certain drugs, the best way to do that is without letting it look like old people came up with the idea and promoted the idea. Just make using that drug look ridiculous and
Yeah.
cringeworthy. Do it in a way that the kids are going to see it that way, and you need young people for that. That's the only way to get rid of the dangerous drugs out there. Um, and like his stance on it is that you have to have laws and punishment and stuff like that. There shouldn't be medical marijuana and all that. And I'm just that bothers me about him. I don't know that I would vote for him for president, but I do like listening
Yeah.
to him talk about stuff. I don't have to
Yeah.
agree with everything he says to like the fact that he tries to apply logic and reason and prefers to disseminate information that he believes to be true and not lie to people. Like if he's wrong about something, he's going to be wrong about it, but that's not the same as lying. Lying is deliberate, right? But in any case, yeah, that's another one where like people who would support Carlson wouldn't necessarily support me because I don't think we need a Food and Drug Administration either.
Yeah.
I don't think the federal government should be doing that.
There's a whole laundry list of alphabet agencies that we could just toss in the bin right now.
Oh, yeah.
And be much happier. We could save so much money.
One of the biggest mistakes we ever made in this country was giving government authority over what we consume, what we ingest.
Yep.
Bullshit.
I mean, surely this was the whole fucking point of the Constitution.
Right.
Right.
Like it's absolutely bullshit. Should not be a thing. Should not exist. Right. But in any case, like that takes this pretty far off topic. Although I like to connect it. I mean, if you look at most of the arrests that take place in regard to things like drugs and while we're at on the topic of things that are illegal, raw milk.
Yeah.
Right? Like men are the
What the
ones that
hell?
get targeted. Not women. Yeah, and raw milk. Like you should be able to make that decision for yourself. Nobody had a big glass of raw milk and then went out and robbed a liquor store because they were feeling the effects, man. Like jonesing for some goat cheese. I gotta go get some extra cash. I'm gonna hold up a convenience store for the. No. Like, come on, right? Okay,
Yeah.
but yeah, so like men get targeted with stuff like that. Men are the ones that really whose shoulders that falls on, and in my opinion, I think one of the biggest issues facing the men's rights movement today is that we have allowed, because women need safety nets, we have federalized things that shouldn't even be governed.
Yeah.
Like that's basically my little soapbox there. But yeah, so we've gone so far in promoting women's interests. Just to correct what the women's organization there, how they worded their survey. We've gone so far in promoting women's interests that we are discriminating against men on a level that the public can't condone anymore. Because we've always discriminated against men. Right? When you look at family law, even when men had custody, they still had to support. If a wife left her husband and didn't divorce him, if he divorced her, he would have to support her. And if she didn't divorce him, he couldn't remarry. and he had to continue to support her financially, even if she chose to live somewhere else. That's discrimination. Nobody did that to women. So, like, that's... But yeah, now people are able to see that the discrimination is discrimination. They're recognizing it for what it is. Now, by comparison, 43%, or 5% less, disagreed somewhat or strongly with that statement. So just 2% shy of half of the population recognizes this discrimination. Just 3% more than 2/5 doesn't recognize it very well. Disagreeing somewhat still allows for recognition of discrimination. So it'd be interesting to see how many disagreed strongly versus disagreeing somewhat.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was looking at this chart as you know, we were talking about this, and for as many countries as there are that there are people that actually agree, you see the percentage of those that disagree, and I was wondering the same thing. How many of
Yeah.
those disagree strongly? Like, because it's somewhere about halfway, a little bit about halfway towards the through the chart, it becomes equalized. There's more. It's like the same number that agree that also disagree.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot of room for exactly that. The people that really don't agree, and it doesn't really break it down enough for me. I mean, the numbers they look good, right? Like, oh my God, look at all these people that agree in all of these countries, but the the percentage of people who disagree is also a little bit worrying, because it seems like there's just well, of course, we know there's a disconnect with people when it comes to these things, right? When it comes to talking about the issues that we are here to discuss, the issues that affect men and boys specifically, right?
Yeah.
There are people who just have blinders on, and they will never ever see it in any other way. But the women, but what about the women? But the women are most. It's disheartening, you know. It really just, I don't know what it's going to take. This is encouraging. I like this. But I I think this kind of shows that there's a lot more work left to do.
Oh, there is. In fact, if you look at this chart, you'll notice, and I've opened it up on another screen because it didn't want to. I couldn't get it to just open up in a new tab, so I opened up the PowerPoint that's linked. The global average is 48% agreeing somewhat or strongly.
Mm-hmm.
And the global average is 43% disagreeing somewhat or strongly. But if you look at which countries and what percentages they were at, 48 or above, you've got quite a bit of Middle Eastern, South American nations, Eastern nations, not necessarily Western nations. And then as you get more toward the bottom, where you see actually 46% and below, you're seeing more Western or Westernized nations listed.
Yeah.
Now, that might change partly due to migration, but let me make sure I've got... This is the one... Yeah,
And
almost half agree that we are discriminating against men. So yeah, that's the question there. And the United States is in the lower part.
Right.
Somewhere in here, if I remember it, because I looked
Right.
this earlier. We're
Yeah.
at 40% and 47%. So 40% of people in the U.S., which is higher than I would have expected, recognize discrimination against men. Whereas if you are in Thailand, 78% recognize discrimination against men. If you are in India,
That's wild to
well,
me. That's
in
wild.
India, the law, the domestic violence law in India is
Yeah, it's
really messed up.
horrific. It's
Like,
so fucked up. Oh my god.
so you guys have heard the 7 years in hell story ad nauseum, right? You've heard about all the false allegations he faced. You've heard about, child protective services coming to their door to investigate allegations that his wife, who was an adult, was abused, made by his ex-wife. That's one person going through the overwhelming majority. He's the only person who was ever taken in for questioning and then thrown in jail like he was arrested for 12 hours, denied food and water, and had his medicines lost by the department. Nobody arrested his kid. Nobody arrested his wife. Nobody arrested his witnesses, right? But if you're in India and your wife makes a dowry abuse allegation, she can accuse your entire family. And there have been instances where the cops have arrested extended family living in a household. So they have the husband, the husband's siblings, the husband's parents, the husband's nieces and nephews, and possibly the husband's aunt or uncle if they're old and disabled and he's taking care of them in his household, depending on, what level of income he has. And so there have been situations where infants have been put in jail with their families in India on a dowry abuse allegation because the infant was accused of dowry abuse. Like,
Jesus.
an infant not old enough to even speak.
Infants.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't care. They're coming after the whole fucking family.
So it doesn't surprise me at all that India has a high percentage of recognition that men are being discriminated against. My guess is that there are probably way more people in India who have experienced this phenomenon, either through being arrested or seeing it happen to a friend, a family member, a coworker, being inconvenienced because someone can't come to work because they've been arrested on a false charge. And that's just that one issue. Then there is the tendency of sexual violence allegations in India. Women can accuse men of rape in India if they have breached a promise to marry. So you get engaged, the engagement doesn't work out, but you had sex while you were engaged, right? All of a sudden, you get accused of rape. And if the allegation doesn't pan out for her, she doesn't follow up on it, whatever, no recourse. There's no consequence for her for making that allegation.
Jesus.
Right? So I bet most of India is aware of this. That's my suspicion is that there will be legislative changes in India because the kind of system that feminists in India have created isn't just unsustainable. It's not just unconscionable. It's intolerable.
Yeah.
It's a situation where it will change or the population will decline.
Exactly.
And their culture will change. They won't have marriage. That'll be it. Saudi Arabia, same thing. If a man abuses his wife, she has recourse. If she beats him, he doesn't have recourse. Right? If a guy is accused of a sex crime and that allegation is proved, he will hang. He doesn't go to jail. He hangs. If he's falsely accused and she gets her 4 witnesses, even if they're lying, it's going to be too late to appeal because he's dead. Right? And I mean that's not the only thing. guardianship, feminists talk about the discriminatory aspects of guardianship as if they only affect women.
Yeah.
A woman not being able to drive herself, which that's changed, women can drive now, but a woman not being able to drive herself around means if she needs something, if she wants to go somewhere, her husband has to take her. Right? So he's pretty much stuck in that role of chauffeur. You know, he's sort of stuck in that she's dependent on him. Like, these are, for everything that we point to as a means of discrimination against women, men have something. And yeah, I looked into, because there was a story that got passed around a while back about a woman who got stoned to death for being raped. And yeah, I looked into the story, and of course Saudi Arabia has very strict laws in regard to sexual relations, and they're very, very different from Western laws. Their whole culture is very, very different from Western culture. And I'm not going to make comments on whether those laws are right or wrong. The people who live under them are aware of them. Those are the laws they live under. And you have control over whether or not you engage in a behavior that violates that law. It's the same thing of, like, if you buy cocaine here in the United States, I have absolute sympathy for your right to make that decision yourself. I think it's wrong that we have a law that says you shouldn't be able to do that. I think it's stupid. I wouldn't recommend it. You know, I've given my kids all the information about, you know, why they shouldn't do that. But I don't think the law should address it. But it does. And I'm not going to feel sorry for you going to jail because you know that.
Yeah.
Right? You get caught, you go to jail. Now, in Saudi Arabia, if you get caught engaging in fornication, which under their law, that's sex before marriage, or adultery, which is sex outside of an existing marriage, that's cheating, right? There's a punishment. Fornication gets lashes or caning or something, and adultery is punishable by death. So when I looked into this case, this woman had been accused of an affair with a man, and her claim was the so-called affair was not consensual. She was raped. Well, we don't know if that was true or not, but the court did not find it to be true. And because the court did not find it to be true, but she admitted to the relationship, then she was found guilty of adultery. So she wasn't stoned to death for being rape, or for fraud, or for being female, or any of that. He and she were both executed for adultery. And the fact of the matter is, it's a harsh law. I'm not going to say that I agree with that. I'm not going to say that it's my place to determine the laws of that country, because it's not my country. Right? I'm not going to move there. That's not why. But I'm not going to move there. Right? But it's not realistic to say that she was discriminated against because she was a woman.
Yeah.
You know, and it's very possible that she made that allegation because, regardless of the situation, the guy's dead in that situation. If it's proved that there was contact like that, sexual contact, he's either going to be guilty of rape or adultery. So he either gets hanged or stoned. One or the other is going to happen to him, no matter what. She can save her ass by claiming to be raped. And if it was a fornication situation instead of adultery, then you have even more incentive to claim rape, because you can just get married after that. And the guy in particular, like, he's not out. If he gets married, he can have more than one wife, right? And if she marries him, she's got the man to support her. So there's actually incentive in that country to make false allegations. Now, I'm not going to necessarily say that that proves any kind of statistic. Like, I can't say, well, there's this many false allegations in Saudi Arabia, because I don't have that information. But logically, I would expect there to be some because of that situation.
Yeah.
There's incentive.
Yeah, if you're gonna, and I'm gonna piss off a lot of people, possibly including the people in this stream, but one of the most ubiquitous problems in global politics is the problem of overpopulation, and I'm not saying whether or not it is a problem or it isn't. I mean, to some degree it maybe is, to some degree it maybe isn't, depending on what country you live in, depending on where all of this overflow is coming from. But you're not going to fix the problem by letting women do whatever they want and making men foot the bill for whatever's going on. They've tried this in all kinds of countries all over the world, including in my country, including in your country, and so on and so forth. And it's just such a cosmic irony that the first countries to, I guess, discover the problem were the first countries to go, okay, well, let's let women be unilaterally in control of how many children they have. And let's not let men be involved in any of these things. Let's just let women be in charge of how many children they have, and then we won't have this overpopulation problem. Which, it's in some ways sounds intuitive. Once you look into it, it's kind of counterintuitive, because so many people have this so many people ascribe to this notion of patriarchy. The only reason people have so many children is because of patriarchy, because men want so many children and therefore they force women to have children. But let's call it the Norwegian gender paradox.
Yeah.
Right? When you let men and women alike have as many children and ascribe themselves to the to whatever they want to do, it turns out women want to have children. Women want to have as many children as possible. And men want to work. They want to do do whatever they can in a non-child raising responsibility to the degree that they can. And this doesn't make sense given the Norwegian gender paradox, that people in Iran and all these other countries, when they are given the option of doing whatever job they want, women tend to do any job they want. And it's only because in such Middle Eastern and dare I say Eastern countries, the only reason they have so many children is because they're given the option of not doing, because they're not given the option of doing whatever they want.
Yeah.
And okay, I'm gonna try and bring this around to what I'm saying. The problem of overpopulation exists because no, I lost it.
I think I can finish it, and my example is going to be single moms in the United States, right? We allow women to do whatever they want in terms of childbirth and child rearing. We have in the United States, we have a plethora of just different types of birth control available to us. We have total control over whether or not we get pregnant. And
Yes.
we hear all the time, oh, accidents. All right, an accident happens because you were careless.
Right.
right? And that's
And
there are no accidents that happen without somebody being careless. It's not
right.
lightning doesn't strike you and you get pregnant. The knock-up fairy does not exist. You didn't slip on the street and fall in a puddle of pregnancy. You did like I intended to get pregnant, just not when it happened. My
Yeah.
intention was to get some things done first that would have made things easier for our family and more advantageous to our children, but I screwed up timing on birth control pills because I didn't follow instructions that I didn't read. And so I gave birth to my son a few years earlier than I intended to, and it fucked everything up for the whole family. And it fucked up our finances. It put my husband in a really rough situation, and it put me in a rough situation because I had to confront the fact that I had done that to my family. Most people don't have to confront. Most women don't have to confront that fact, right? They get
Yeah.
every safety net in the world. I was really lucky. At least I feel like I was really lucky in that my parents didn't let me off the hook for that. Now what are you going to do? You have created this situation for your child and your family. What's your next steps? And I got all kinds of advice, and I took some of it, and I rejected some of it, and I scrambled and worked really hard to mitigate the fallout that my kids and my husband experienced from my failure to do what I should have done, right? Because that's what you're supposed to do. But what the overwhelming majority of women do is ask for somebody else to deal with the problem. I need a government stipend. I need child support from that man. I need this. I need that. And Richard Bier, you're right. If I didn't conceive then, I wouldn't have the son that I have today. Because, and this story doesn't excuse my fuck up at all. But while I was pregnant, I went for the torture test where they go spelunking in your nethers for the first time in about 7 years, and they found cancerous cells on my cervix. And they took them all off with a biopsy. This was so tiny, like smaller than a sweet pea, but it was there. And they evaluated them, they analyzed them, and there's two basic categories of cervical cancer. One moves kind of slow. You have time to find it and treat it, and it's not incredibly dangerous, but it's still cancer and it's still bad. The other one starts out like that, a little tiny size of a sweet pea, and then just blows up really fast and kills you before you get to the stage where there's nothing you can do about it before you have any symptoms. And that's the one I had. And so if I want to be really honest about it, my son saved my life. It's one of the million times I almost died. Didn't almost die from that, really. But you're right, I wouldn't have. And no, I don't have HPV. I went back and got tested over and over again because I was sure, I've been through some things that could have led to that, right? And then the ex-wife was one of those women that we'll just say she was a very popular girl. But in any case, yeah, I every single time, I've come back with no, you don't have any reason to suspect this. It's testing is negative. You don't have any signs of it, no symptoms of it, and I have never since then had any sign of cancer either. It was just that one moment, that one tumor. That's it. So yeah, I wouldn't have had a son because I wouldn't have survived.
Yeah.
But there you go. And he's the only one because I wasn't built for making babies. Really, this is the opposite of the female character in one of the early Conan the Barbarian novels that said her dad used to say she was built to bear many children and nurse all of them. I have no curves, none. So, except in the wrong direction sometimes. But yeah.
You had one.
Yep.
I've got the curves. I got no goddamn kids.
There
And
you go.
I think I like it that way.
But yeah,
Alright.
I like, if I hadn't screwed that up, I probably would have had more. But we never got into a financial position where that was a good idea. The thing about women in the United States, and the reason that we don't have an overpopulation in the United States. The population problem we have in the United States is an unfunded population, and it's unfunded by itself. It's funded by the government instead, and that's bad. Being funded by the government means you are always going to be poor. Nobody, as a citizen that isn't in a position of elite authority that where they can exploit their power and their knowledge and do things that are unfair to everybody else. Nobody gets rich being just supported by the government. Most of your life you live in poverty. And women settle for that safety net that strangles them and their children and their children's children. Clear on to the generation that finally figures out, living dependent like this really sucks, and we're going to try to get something better for ourselves, and the only way for us to do it is work for it. That's why there's a population problem. In every country, you have one of two things going on. Either the government wants lots of babies and then uses them for fodder, cannon fodder, work fodder, and things like that. Or women have no accountability. They have all the sexual rights they want, but no accountability for their sexual choices.
It's not an or situation, it's an and situation.
Well, like Saudi Arabia, women can't just go fuck everything that moves, right? In the United States, a woman can go fuck everything that moves. If she has babies with 8 different baby daddies, the government will go after those baby daddies, and the government will give her money, and feminists will defend her right to live free of criticism for engaging in that behavior. In Saudi Arabia, she'll get caned or stoned or whatever. They'll take care of her, and then they'll take her kids, and they'll strap bombs to their chest and send them out to die someplace, bombing someplace. Right? Or they'll put them in a military and have them do something else. They'll be grunt workers somewhere, or they won't have any advantages. But it's not the same. But the problem, the result is the same. They don't have the same. Their lack of accountability is different, right? And that creates a different problem. I'm not going to say the United States isn't using our boys for cannon fodder, because hell, they're talking about reenacting the draft right now to send them to Ukraine. Yeah. But it's still not that it's more moral when it happens here, but people are given a different moral story. And people are given a different moral story about sex here, right?
I heard from The View that American Christians are just as bad as the Taliban.
Yeah, as bad as as bad as we were told the Taliban is, and as bad as the murder, that obviously that part of it, yeah, definitely. But I think there are things that we've been told about the Taliban that aren't entirely true either. And by the way, and I'm not saying don't object to the Taliban, because obviously they're still a gang, right? And every government is a gang. These guys are just a more violent gang than directly violent to their own people gang than some of the other governments. That's the biggest difference between the Taliban and, say, the United States government, is that the Taliban has more visible violence toward their own people. In the United States, if the government wants to kill you, they take you away and put you in a cell and leave you there for about a decade before they kill you. And if the Taliban wants to kill you, they just drag you out in the street and shoot you in the head right then and there. Right? That's the only real difference, right? They might have different reasons. In the United States, you have certain crimes you have to commit or be convicted of committing that are violence against other people, the Taliban will shoot you for singing. But at the same time, we're still looking at an organization that exists because of a proxy war between the United States and Russia in a foreign country. That sounds kind of familiar right now, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
the FBI will put you in Guantanamo for singing the wrong thing.
True.
And
Or singing it in the wrong place.
I guess the difference is, the U.S. government won't put you in Guantanamo for singing for singing Christian hymns, in the same way the Taliban will torture you for singing something that isn't, I love Allah and stuff.
No.
The FBI will torture you for singing. How do I finish this sentence?
The FBI will torture you for singing the Star Spangled Banner.
Exactly.
I'm not kidding.
On the wrong day.
They will torture you for singing anything that is against the rainbow flag. Hmm?
They'll torture you for singing My Country 'Tis of Thee. They'll torture you for singing Yankee Doodle.
My Country 'Tis of Thee is a re-evaluation of the British national anthem, by the way.
Yeah.
My country 'tis of thee.
Yeah. Our next line is Sweet Land of Liberty.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, I know the whole song, I'm not going to sing it.
Land of the pilgrims ride from every mountainside, let freedom ring. And I don't know the second verse. That's what you're gonna get
I'll just say it sounds way better when you sing than when I sing. Especially right now. Like right now, I've got Niagara Falls going down the back of my throat. But it's bad. I have 3 bottles of water and a bottle of body armor in front of me because of that. But yeah, so I mean, but when you look at this, so I look at these countries like Thailand. I don't know what's going on in Thailand. I need to research that and learn more about that, because clearly there are things going on there that would, put the United States system, make the United States system look reasonable. Otherwise, people only recognize discrimination against men when it's an extreme situation.
They'll send you to jail for saying anything bad about the Thai royal family.
Well,
they still have a royal family, by the way.
That tells you something right there. But I mean, there must be a very gynocentric federal court system there. Very family court system. Sorry, not federal, but. Yeah, there must be a very gynocentric family court system there, because that's the most likely reason. They probably also have discriminatory DV law. My guess would be they don't recognize abuse when a woman does it, and they exaggerate it when the man does it. Because the number 78% of people agreed, at least somewhat or strongly, that we are now discriminating against men. Right? That's pretty high. Only 16% disagreed. And in Saudi Arabia, they had 74% versus 17%. So that's some pretty extreme numbers there. And you see this United Arab Emirates, very high agreement that men are discriminated against. If you see the way war is done in Middle Eastern countries, men are just cannon fodder. Right? They're really just cannon fodder. Like, not every Middle Eastern country does the suicide bomber with a bomb strapped to his chest, but they are engaged in direct combat with each other. There's not somebody with a computer guiding a drone. That's it. There's men with guns pointed at each other. So I'm sure that they probably recognize pretty well that that's discrimination. Men are the ones that are obligated to do that. Um, and you see this South Africa. That doesn't surprise me either. And it's not as dramatic. Argentina, I don't know enough about. But when you get into the South American countries, and Spain, like,
Well,
Spain is very gynocentric right now.
yeah.
There's a huge, like, their laws are gynocentric. They did, if I remember right, make misogyny illegal. Their domestic violence laws are extremely gynocentric. Their family laws extremely gynocentric. Their term for toxic masculinity, I think, is machismo, and it's demonized, really demonized. And so, yeah, that doesn't surprise me, but they have that recognition. I think the biggest one that surprises me is that Japan's not noticing it, because
Yeah.
they have so many false allegations of groping in public places that they had to create a train system for women. The
Yeah.
allegedly to protect them from groping, but I think it's just as much a protection of men from being falsely accused, because they do have an honor culture in which if a man is accused of something like that, it's the end of his career. His family may reject him. He may even commit suicide over it.
Now, I wonder how a country like Japan would treat the transgender community.
Well,
I
it's
mean,
How
Uh,
dare
that-
you say that bloke ain't a guy, and that dude ain't a lady?
let's take Germany and Japan, two countries that are not allowed to have nuclear weapons
yeah.
because of the World War that they recently lost, and so they have nothing left except this gynocentric idea that all they can do in the event of a war is throw men at the problem. And it's not as though they're alone in that paradigm. The rest of the Western world, the rest of the entire world, it still has the option of throwing men at the problem in the event of a war. But because Germany and Japan have no nuclear option, they're not allowed to have nuclear weapons because of what happened in the Second World War. The only option they have is throwing men at the problem. But again, like I said, the rest of the world, even though they have the nuclear option, they also still have the option of throwing men at the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
So, yeah.
they're now, things very well could have changed dramatically since I was there. But one of the things that I noticed when I was there was the men that were around our group. I was there as part of a Sister Cities exchange with my mom when she was president of my little small community's city council. And actually, the city that was our sister city isn't a city anymore. They merged with another community. But we went to a place that at the time was called Hokudan-cho. And they took us to Tokyo, and we spent time in Tokyo. We met a couple of groups of people in Tokyo, and we spent a week in Hokudan-cho, and met more groups of people in Hokudan-cho. And everywhere I went, the men took care of the women. They were protective. They were accommodating. They were like the epitome of what you would think of as gentlemanly. They were always looking after whether we were comfortable, whether we had everything we needed, everything. And it wasn't solicitous. It was just like an automatic. If you like, when I take care of a person with disabilities that has a mobility challenge and they have to wear a gait belt and we walk, I have so frequently worked with this type of mobility difficulty where a gait belt is a belt that you wear around your abdominal area to allow another person to assist you in maintaining your balance while you're walking. Your walk is your gait. So it's GAIT, right? And you get used to having a level of looseness in how you hold on to that belt, but not taking your hand off of it, or with some people having your hand close in case you need to get a hold of the belt. And with other people, you have directional pressure just to counteract a lack of balance that a person consistently has, right? Those become second nature. You don't necessarily appear to be thinking about doing it. It's just a thing that it's as second nature as if you have really long hair, getting your hair out of the way before you sit down so you don't sit on it.
Yes.
Which I've done. Or if you are wearing a skirt, a lot of times you might push your skirt under your legs, or push your kilt under your legs when you're sitting down so that it doesn't bunch up underneath you. That caregiving that I saw men doing in Japan when I was there was that kind of second nature. There didn't appear to be any they weren't thinking consciously about it. They weren't asking about it. They just did it. That's pretty gynocentric. So I part of me, I look at this and I'm like, they're not realizing it. There's probably a great deal of discrimination that the men in Japan are overlooking because they are so accustomed to their role as the true alpha takes care of the people around him, right? The true alpha tries to make sure anybody under them, anybody they're responsible for, is safe and comfortable and happy. And that's basically like the men around us made themselves responsible for us without even asking or being asked if they had to do that. It just was automatic. So I think they may take on a lot of responsibility and allow a lot of responsibility to be imposed on them without considering, do people have a right to do this to me? Are my rights being violated when they do this to me? Is this unfair to me? Because they're not considering themselves. They're considering everybody else first.
Right.
So that's my primary explanation for that. Now, I don't know, like I said, 1994 was a long time ago. So things may have changed. There may be an entirely different culture, but I don't know. The fact that they have those women-only trains and the stated reason is allegations of men groping when a lot of times the situation is the train is so crowded that there's no space between people. That's not groping. That's no space.
And there's no such thing as women groping men.
Right. Or false allegations. Like I would bet that it's just that men in Japan are so tolerant of the discrimination they're experiencing that they're not noticing it. They're not aware of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like white noise or whatever.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's because they were so instantaneously colonized by the West, and not to pour so much shit on the West as we call it, but the overriding ideology of the West is gynocentrism.
Yeah.
Which suggests that Japan was forced into this gynocentric ideology.
Yeah, I think they may have had a great deal more balance between the sexes in their culture before they were westernized.
Yeah.
And men had responsibilities and women had responsibilities. Men had rights and women had rights. But
But maybe there's a lot to be said
Yeah,
for
and
the
well,
for the idea that a culture that puts all of these restrictions on men and not on women
yeah,
creates a culture in which men are sort of restricted to doing what they do best, while women sit around forcing men to do what they do best. And maybe that was what turned Japan into such an industrious culture, and maybe it's what turned not Japan, Germany into such an industrious culture.
yeah.
It didn't work out for Germany in the same way it worked out for Japan, but Japan in the late 20th century
Well,
turned out into quite an industrious culture. You may have noticed how much y'all love video games,
yeah.
and how much this was because of how industrious Japan turned out to be as a culture. Eh?
Yeah, I do want to point out because I've got someone in the chat that's added some information here. Meow off for I don't even know how to pronounce this. Miwa for Sina. I've just butchered that. I'm very sorry, but pointed out Japan is gruesome when it comes to male-female relations. It's the country known for people working themselves into a grave to the point where they have a word for it. Yep, and they also have words for people that reject that, and they're not looked upon very well, right? And it's karoshi they call it. And women absolutely refuse to marry anyone unless they make an obnoxious amount of money, even working women who intend to get married and then just quit their job. So that does kind of seem like Meow of Forcina. There we go. Okay. It's probably from an anime that I haven't seen yet, which I probably would like. I haven't run into very many that I don't. Or a video game maybe that again, I haven't run into very many that I don't like. But in any case, yeah, that kind of confirms, like I was saying, men are so acclimated to this that where they aren't necessarily answering that they're being discriminated against. And of course, women aren't going to admit it. It doesn't mean they're not. It means they're so used to it that they don't even see it.
Yeah.
And it goes on, and Japan is pretty big on transformism in a number of cultures. They just don't see it through the rainbow amoeba glasses. Yeah, if you look at the way it's handled in the media that makes its way out of Japan, it doesn't look anything like Western. It's not gay rights anymore. It's the Western woke culture has completely destroyed understanding people's nuance. But then one more comment I'm going to go through. This is hogwash. Miss Hannah, you probably haven't seen the male-female characters. For starters, they aren't male-female. They have female carriages and mixed carriages. I kind of expected that. And that's always the way it is, too, isn't it? Right? Women claim to be afraid, and then they have to have their own space, but that doesn't mean they don't stop, or that doesn't mean they stop using the space that they consider men's space. It's ours and mine, not yours and mine. And then, guess which ones are packed? My bet, dimes to dollars, my bet would absolutely be the mixed and not the female only. Right. I'll bet they get upset if somebody accidentally steps on the wrong one, though. A male accidentally steps on the wrong one. But I mean, that's the way it is with bathrooms here in the United States. Men have men's bathrooms. Women will just barge right in.
Mm-hmm.
And women never cared about that. Women never objected to that. Women never said a word about that. Right? Until they wanted to label trans women men. And regardless of how you feel about that part of the issue, then they wanted to object to them being in the women's room because they're men, and call them dangerous because they're men, right? I'm calling bullshit. Like, I don't believe these carriages exist, these trains exist because women are in mass getting groped by Japanese men. I think they exist because women are in mass doing exactly the same thing that women in the United States do. They exaggerate shit, they take offense at shit that isn't offensive, they make shit up, they take things as being sexual when they're not. A woman will hear you say something innocuous, and if there is a dirty-minded interpretation of it, she'll accuse you of sexually harassing her by using loaded language that you didn't load. Right? So I would bet that this is not due to harassment. I would bet that this is due to the tendency of women to perceive or treat things as harassment because it is to their advantage, or because it makes them feel wanted, or because it gets them special treatment that they wouldn't receive if they weren't playing victim. It's just my guess. And I would bet that just offhand, Japanese men are so used to putting up with that, and they are so gynocentric as a population, especially the older Japanese men, that they just tolerate it, and they don't necessarily view it as victimization of them or inappropriate treatment of them. Oh, okay, so it's Pokemon, Mewtwo. Mew like Mewtwo. Of course, that's it's one that I like, but I've never really learned enough about. My son would laugh at me, though. Oh, yeah, the boat of the dongle joke. Donglegate was... for people who are less than 10 years in the movement, Donglegate was a situation at PyCon. I think it was PyCon, where there was a speaker on a stage. There were a couple of guys, a couple of techs at the event that were sitting in the audience and talking, and one of them said, notice the size of a dongle he had attached to one of his devices, and said, oh, that's a big dongle. And then one of them said something about, I can't remember the way it is, just forking your code. I'd like to fork his code, which was explained to me as basically if you have written a program and there's a function that it does that somebody wants to create something that uses that function to do something else, so they create code that starts at that point and moves forward to describe that's forking off, which makes sense. But there was a woman sitting in front of them that took this, repo, I'd fork his repo, that took this in a sexual way, which it doesn't matter. It might have been, but it doesn't really matter because they weren't conversing with her. She just overheard it, and she got upset, and she tweeted about it, and her tweet went viral, and they got fired.
Oh my God.
And then she got canceled, and she played victim of getting canceled. And yeah, Humongous was another one. Humongous was a guy that went to ask a question at an incident or event, and his question offended the woman running the event. She demanded to know his name. She went full Karen on him, started asking him all kinds of personal questions and yelling at him and everything. So he told her his name was Hugh, and she said, Hugh what? And he goes, Humongous, and he patted his belly. Not anything else. It was definitely not a sexual reference. Unless like you have a fetish for belly buttons or something. But he patted his belly, and she just went ballistic. Humongous what? Humongous what? She called security on him and everything. Like it just went ballistic on him. Doxed him.
Yep.
And
Varna Joshi, say her name.
Yeah.
And or something like that.
I can never remember. She was very upset, and she did that to herself. Like she made herself upset, and that tendency, that behavior is. He put his hand on his belly, when it was definitely a joke about being fat. He made a fat joke about himself, and she took it in a sexual way.
Right, and even if he knew that there was a double entendre there, she would have to know. She would have to have the mens rea. She would have to know his mind. She would
Yeah.
have to know what he was thinking,
Well,
right?
hell,
But
even if there was it wouldn't have been a big deal. I mean, like, he
right.
didn't do anything to her.
He didn't violate anybody's rights. He responded to you in a way that you didn't like. Well, lady, who are you
She was
to
acting like a psycho hose beast already.
she absolutely, absolutely, and would not let up, and demanded that other men, the security officers,
Right.
get involved to come around and help save her. Oh my God! Because
From
he
this man
said
with a sense of humor.
right that said words that offended my earballs. Oh my God!
Yeah.
It's just and this is the United States of America, and this
Yeah.
is what women are allowed to get away with.
This is
Yeah.
so much bigger than the United States of America.
This is
It
everywhere.
really is.
It really is everywhere.
She, as an Eastern person, did it on behalf of the European accent she had, in order to get across to the Western, and I mean American sensibilities, to whom she was pandering. Like this goes all the way from the east to the west, all the way from as far east as Japan to the far west as fucking Hollywood.
Yeah. And men don't have the same capability with regard to that. Like, and I've experienced this. You've heard me talk about God Evolves, and his efforts at getting me banned, which resulted in him getting banned, which was great. But one of the things that he did was he scrolled back through my Twitter feed, trying to find something to report me for, and the only thing he found that he could treat it like it was something objectionable was an image I posted. Walmart has these nice little buns that, it's funny, they're shaped like a pair of lips. Either end, you can visualize either end and you'll be fairly correct. They don't have all the wrinkles of the bottom end, but if you have an imagination. But they look like a mouth. And they it's basically just a football-shaped thing that they've split before they cooked it, so that it has an indentation in the middle when they cook it. And they sell them unsweetened, and they're just puffy. And then they sell them sweetened, and the way they sweeten them is the same way they glaze donuts. They dip them in a vat of hot sugar that is liquefied, and it coats them. And it's like sugar and butter and I think maybe water makes this glaze. Well, they kind of shrivel up. So I posted it on Twitter with some text. I put a fat text with the puffy ones that said before, and a skinny text with the shriveled ones that said after. Didn't give any further description. I mean, you could view it as innuendo. You could view it as just, look what happens, how these shrivel up when you glaze them. Could have been completely innocent. It wasn't, but it could have been. But he was deeply offended by this, and decided to make it a statement about the ruination of the genitalia of women who have had sex, and tried really hard to shame me for it. And it resulted in him getting laughed at roundly by everyone in the conversation, including the other feminists. I think Tekla even called him out on that. And a male feminist, Jen Bottle, not a regular male. But yeah, and that just, like, I ended up making a meme out of it, where I screenshot his comments and put red text on the meme that didn't hide his comments that said, "You got triggered by bread." And then I just used that as my replies to him after that, because how can you take somebody seriously after they got triggered by bread? But that's what happens when a guy tries to do it, right? When a guy tries to do it, he gets made fun of, he gets shamed by his friends, he becomes ineffective in any further criticism. That's the end of it. Like, he lost the moment he did that. The whole conflict between him and me, he lost. For the whole rest of the conflict, he had no power. But if it had been the other way around, if I'd have been a dude, right, and he'd have been a lady, then he would have been able to use it against me. Then it would have been inappropriate. Somebody would have been looking up my employer. I would have been accused of harassing her, right? It would have been a whole big thing. Totally different response, right? But with that, I think we're going to have to continue this article next week, because there's quite a bit more here. I also, probably want to look a little more at that graph, but I do want to read the rest of this, but it is 9:53. So
And I want to point out that, there's 195 countries globally, and these are the only 32 that they're looking at. So
yeah.
that might be something else to kind of dig into, but I don't
Those
know.
are
Whatever.
the ones that were published in the report. 32 countries. I don't know if maybe they couldn't get responses from some of the other countries, but who knows?
It's like the chart kind of makes it. You want to feel good about the numbers that they're putting in the chart, but
Yeah.
I'm looking at what's not there.
Yeah, if I had to make a bet and put money on why, my money would be on the organization. Let's see, the organization's name is the Global Institute for Women's Leadership. I will bet there are probably chapters or offices for this organization in all of those countries. They may be established in academia in all of those countries, but they're not established in the countries that are omitted. And that's probably why these countries were included. And if you notice, these are countries that are more financially active. Well, South Africa might not be a big financial partner with the rest of the world. Might be. I don't know enough about that one, but a lot of these countries are countries where I'm not necessarily going to say they're all. It's fair to say they're probably all first world, mostly first world areas, or have mostly first world characteristics, or have a first world financial relationship with other countries in the world. And so, because feminism is a first world thing, like you don't see feminism in as so much taking hold in countries where the biggest problem is that the water is too dirty for anybody to drink it, right? Feminists will talk about those areas, and they'll claim ownership of those areas, and they'll tell everybody how hard women have it in those areas, but they don't do as much in those areas unless there is a governing body that provides money for it, right? If they can grift the UN or grift the country's government to give them money to serve women in that country, then they will. And I think first world countries give them a lot more opportunity. That countries where the biggest problem is whether the dress is, what was it, blue or silver or blue or white. I don't know. I never really got it. That controversy that supposedly took the internet by storm. Like, those countries are where feminism really does most of what it's doing, because it spends all, it gets all that money from governments that are overtaxing their people and then spending it on stuff like feminism. And that's like, especially, you see Canada, Britain, the U.S., Germany, France, Belgium. Like, these countries all have, they're funding feminism in the country. India spends a lot of money on feminism. I'm not so sure Saudi Arabia is funding feminism, but I will bet that there are foreign nations funding feminism in Saudi Arabia.
Hence, they're all arguing over the question of what is a woman.
Yeah.
It's either the turf evaluation of what is a woman, or it's the what's the word? That other thing.
Oh,
intersectional
trad wives.
intersectional interpretation of what is a woman. That's like the blue and black versus gold and white interpretation of what is a woman. That's what everyone in the world is doing now. It's just two different versions of feminism.
Yeah. We have a third version now.
That's how we colonize the world. Is it this color of feminism or this other color of feminism?
Yeah.
One way or another, we're gonna colonize all of you. That's what it takes. It's not about whatever color of uniform your soldiers are wearing. It's whatever color of uniform your feminists are wearing. One way or another, we're gonna colonize all of you, so that you conform to our version of gynocentrism, which is whatever version of gynocentrism will colonize you. Good luck, the world.
Yeah. I kind of wish I had been asked that question as part of that video, because I would have pissed everybody off except for people who already like this show. If somebody asked me what is a woman, my answer would be a person who has less responsibility, less accountability, and less obligation than a man, but still demands all the same rights.
Yep.
And that's all I would say. I wouldn't say anything about biology, wouldn't say anything about trans this or biological gender that, sex that, nothing.
I mean, you really don't need to. You really don't need to, because that is the axis on which we're actually playing. That's the field that we're actually playing on. It's not about your chromosomes or anything. It's about rights and responsibilities and accountability.
How dare you?
We can 100% say
it's clearly a black and blue
white
dress.
issue.
How dare you?
White yellow issue.
And we can definitively say on this show, on the basis of that definition, that trans women are not recognized in modern society as women, because they are not treated as if they have less obligation than men. They are not treated as though they have less accountability than men, or less responsibility than men. They can be treated as responsible for things that other trans women or other people claiming to be trans women have done, right? So they're still getting treated like men. There you go. That's the problem. That's the crux of the issue. Is trans women are getting treated like men, and people are objecting to them going into women's restroom, not because they're necessarily all dangerous, but because those people are prejudiced against men. I mean, they presume them that way because they are men.
How dare you? People are prejudiced against women. How dare you?
I dare. And I dare to call the end of the show. So I think I've kept up with the super chats. I don't think there's any that I've missed. I hope I haven't missed any. I did miss last week a super chow. So before I read this week's super chows, I'm going to scroll up here through all the different shows we did. I remember showing you guys the Chad. That was cool. But Meredith G sent us a super chow, and I didn't see it, or it didn't show. One or the other. In either way, I didn't read it. She said it gave us $5 and said, "Thanks for the conversation. I've been at office jobs for over 20 years, and I have found that trashing the bathroom has become an increasing problem in the last 10 years. wasn't a problem when I got out of college, as the number of women increased in bathroom cleanliness decreased. And that's a fair notice, a fair assessment, because that's a consistent problem everywhere I've worked. If there are gendered bathrooms, the women's room is terrible. And the worst story I heard was my dad, when he retired. I take after my dad. When I've said I'm never going to retire, I watched my dad, like, when he couldn't work, his health deteriorated rapidly. And I think I'm the same way. If I don't have work to do, my health deteriorates. And so he took a job at a retail establishment for makers, hobbyists and stuff. That one of the departments at that establishment was frames and framing of artistic work, and he had experience in that as a photographer. Right, so he was there for, I guess, till pretty close to the COVID crisis before he really couldn't do that anymore. And one night, I was talking to him about my experiences at the gas station with the gas station bathrooms. And he's like, yeah, there's a kid whose responsibility it was to sweep out the bathrooms. And I don't know what was going on in the women's room. He said, but one night he came running out of there, went straight to the mop bucket and just vomited.
Oh.
I'm like, yeah, I'm betting that was either poop or period, because
Probably.
it might have been both.
Or, yes.
Like, women will have a bowel problem and they will abuse a public bathroom. Like, just really abuse a public bathroom. So yeah, that makes sense. It fits.
But at least they don't require ire in your tires.
Yeah, you got ire in your tars.
Yes,
Ire
yes,
in
we've
your
heard
tars.
that story, Hannah.
A
You
gazillion
don't
times.
tell that
But
story.
you got to say
at
the
end.
accent right. It's ire in your tars. And and that's after you buy the ole for your car.
The Earl.
Yeah, well, that particular accent probably is ole. It's ole and ire. Yeah, but there are places in the U.S. where it's Earl. You buy Earl for your car. You buy Earl for your car. But yeah, so we had that one. So that's the only one I missed before. Meredith G gave us $5 this time
It's all
around.
Ohio.
Yeah, it's all Ohio. That's right. Unless you're from the northern part of it, then it's well, that's when it's Ohio. If you're from the southern part of it, it's Ohio. But and that's not. It's more south than north. Like, more than the northern half is Ohio.
Your country is too big. Your country needs to be smaller, for God's sake. Shrink your fucking
Just
country.
Ohio. Ohio is big enough that part of the thing that led to me being a men's rights activist was when my husband and I got married. The ex-wife had such an objection to him moving on and still being part of his children's lives that she, without leaving the state of Ohio, moved a 4-hour drive away. And we're not the biggest state. Like, California takes up half of, or more than half of the, it's like 3/4 of the West Coast is one state.
Yep.
It's like if you moved from Northern California to Southern California, that's more than a 4-hour drive away. But yeah, so like.
And anyway, Meredith.
That's our situation. But Meredith gave us $5 and said, "Honey for the Badgers. Thanks for highlighting the invisible victims of IPV." And then Michael Emmerich Winberg gave us $5 and said, "It's at times like this that I remember Dick Masterson's words. All women are good for is having children, but they're not very good at raising them." And that's true. If you look at the situation with single moms, the current child custody support system works on that paradigm, that men are able to raise their kids on their own, but women are not able to do so without either the state or a man. And I would actually argue even further than that. Even with the state or the money a man can provide, women are still not raising their kids. I honestly wouldn't have wanted to be a single mom. I don't think the kids would have been okay if it had been just me either, and that's with me being more red-pilled. I still don't think I would have done well enough to raise the kids without my husband.
I mean,
I would have been fucked.
there's no such thing as a single mom.
No, really, there's not.
She has the state as the alpha male in her relationship, and that's the problem.
Yeah. There are community moms, not moms of the community, moms that exploit the community.
Yeah.
And then Michael gave us another $5 and said, "You think that's air you're breathing? You remind me of my mother's words. She often says, even though she never realized the irony of it in the past 3 years, that if the government could tax our air, they would. Well, what do you call forbidding you to even breathe outside your home without constantly buying disposable masks and paying the VAT that comes attached to them?" And that's a good point. Like, you were forbidden to breathe the government's air for 3 years, right? Then we got another comment from Michael Windberg. Michael Emmerich Windberg gave us $5. I got this stupid pop-up coming from Discord, wants to sell me something. Like, shut up, Discord. Gave us $5 and said, "I'm sorry, but I can't see those results as all that promising. The survey is similar to how less than 10% of women identify as feminist in the sense that they may pay lip service that women's equality has gone too far, but their main gripe is that men are no longer fulfilling whatever needs they have, no more real men, etc., and would not for anything in the world support any policy change that would benefit the rights of men over the privileges of women." And it's a good
right.
point. It's a very good point.
He's out of line, but he's not wrong.
Well, he's not even out of line. Here's the thing. I think when this survey gets done, they're probably getting answers from both sexes. When women recognize that men are discriminated against, it is often because of circumstances like in India, where they have dowry laws that almost necessitate abuse. Women are getting arrested with their sons and their brothers or their dads, and that's they're probably noticing the discrimination against him because of the consequences they're experiencing. I've met a lot of women who are second wives, like me, that only care about the discrimination against men in the family court system because it has impacted them. And I mean, I've experienced that impact and everything. But that's not what makes it unfair. Like, men are committing suicide, men are dying over this. Even if they weren't dying over this, they shouldn't have to die for people to recognize that if you're forced to labor for someone else's financial benefit, forced at gunpoint, essentially, because when you are arrested by people with guns. Cops always have guns. They always have guns, and they always have tasers. And the current pattern of news definitely should make people aware that they're not always wise in their use or careful in their use of either. So it's fair to say that men are enslaved, right? But when it comes to women recognizing that, I think it is true that most women who recognize it because they have been disadvantaged as a result of the discrimination against a man in their lives, not because he was disadvantaged by it. So there's that. I think men might have the same problem. Some men might have the same problem, because men get very distressed when bad things happen to the people that they take care of. Right? But at the same time, 10 years ago, if this survey was done, I would bet that none of these countries' numbers would be as high as they are now in recognizing that men face discrimination.
No.
So it is a toe in the door, not a whole foot, but a toe in the door of getting people to understand that discrimination against men is happening and that it is an injustice. We need to get people to recognize that our society has a responsibility to, as a society that recognizes human rights, to respect men's human rights just as much as women's, and to not allow discrimination that results in disadvantage for men, right? But that's a next step and a next. So I consider this a baby step. It is still a positive. It doesn't have to be a giant step forward to be happy about it. It's a beginning of momentum, but it only works that way if we pick it up and move with it.
Right.
Let's see, that's the Super Chows. I'm going to keep that open. We'll look and see if we have... Where is Rumble? There we go. Comments on Rumble. Why the hell won't the page show? You know, this is something that my computers have all started doing in the last year that I swear to you they didn't do before. If I have one tab open and I'm looking at that tab and then I move to another tab and I minimize or put, like if I have windows open with tabs and I put one window in front of another window, my computer ditches the information from the tab I was looking at before and it has to reload. And I don't know what changed.
That's weird.
But let's see here. Where is... That's the wrong tab. So now I can find the right tab. Here we go. All right. And we'll actually have a pretty active live chat this time. I usually see like 4 or 5 comments, and there's like 30 here. But let's see. And then everybody enjoyed Humongous. Going backwards. Yeah. Occupant 42 pointed out in regard to the beginning discussion, I'd be willing to bet that at the time if a white woman whistled at a black man, the man would have seen some consequences. Yeah. Lauren, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I don't know if Neat is still in the chat, but the last stream she was talking about Rumble because, you know, there's the push to get everybody over to Rumble. And my biggest problem was that within the mobile app, there's no live chat.
Yeah.
And so I updated the app, and I think that they actually fixed that. So thank you, Neat. Because
that's cool. That's cool.
I definitely want to move over there, and you know, let's get away from YouTube. They suck.
I wish Restream would get on board with that. Like, Restream has it gives me a one chat that I can read. I can see comments from Facebook. I can see comments from Twitch. I can see comments from YouTube. I think that's actually it as far as what we're getting on, and most of them are, of course, from YouTube. But we do have some people watching on Twitch because I see comments in the chat on Twitch. But I would love to see it integrate with Rumble so that live comments on Rumble would also show in the chat. That would make my life easier. We don't have any paid Rumble rants, but that was an interesting point. If we threw the bureaucracy in the harbor, the best analogy would be throwing leeches in. Yeah, that's perfect. That is absolutely perfect. So there we go. That is all of our chats that I'm gonna go ahead and read. I'm not gonna read all of the comments, but and also they did notice they did get the title correct, Dante's Peak. So there we go. But with that, I'm going to thank everybody for listening. This was a little bit of an extra long sausage, and we're not done. We're going to talk about this some more next week.
I would like to thank everyone who didn't turn up to our YouTube chat, who usually does, on account of how much they hate us. I'd like to think I was part of why they didn't persist.
There you go.
Because they hate me more than they hate anyone else. Thanks, everyone, for thinning the herd into the people who love us by those who shall not be named.
You have to deserve to be named, you know.
Yes.
And no, I am not running for president. Like I was seeing it for president in the chat. Don't do that. I do not want the job. Can't do the job with a gate belt, right? Unless Biden is still there, and he might need one. But anyway, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks you guys for sticking out the long sausage with me and talking about this. And I gotta say thanks to Dr. John Barry for writing this article. It's a really fascinating article. Mm-hmm. And of course, thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. Good night, all.
Good night, y'all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.